My parents are moving into your house this weekend, my son-in-law said, calm as if you were reading off a grocery list. We already reserved the moving truck. I set down my coffee mug and smiled at him. Didn't argue. Didn't protest. Just said, "Okay, Adrian." And he left my kitchen looking like a man who'd just closed a deal. He had no idea what was coming. Before we go any further, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I'd love to know. My name is Dale. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 32 years as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio. Bridges, drainage systems, retention walls, the kind of work where you learn fast that the thing that looks solid from the outside is often the thing most likely to fail. You learn to read stress fractures before the collapse. I bought the house on Wethersfield Drive 8 months after I retired. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a finished basement, and a back porch that faces west so you get the full sunset over the ridgeline. I'd drawn up a list of what I wanted in retirement housing, the same way I'd spec'd infrastructure projects. I knew every square foot I needed and why. I paid cash. 32 years of careful living made that possible. My daughter Renee called the afternoon I closed. Her voice was warm, excited, genuine. "Dad, that's incredible. Send me pictures. Can Drew and I come see it next week?" Drew is her husband. Adrian Marsh. He works in residential sales, which means he spends his days convincing people that what they're looking at is worth more than it is. He's good at it. That should have told me something. They came for dinner that first Sunday. I made pot roast, the way my late wife Connie used to. Renee walked through every room with her hand trailing along the walls, the way she'd done as a little girl exploring new spaces. Drew moved differently, slower. His eyes went to corners, to closets, to the staircase leading to the upper floor. He wasn't experiencing the house, he was measuring it. "Beautiful place, Dale." He settled into the chair at the head of my dining table. My chair. Without seeming to notice. "Must be a lot to keep up with, just the two of you." "Just me," I said. "Renee doesn't live here." He laughed. Right. I just mean 4 bedrooms for one person. That's a lot of house." Renee looked at her plate. "A small thing, but I noticed it. I designed it that way," I said. "I have plans for the space." "Sure." He nodded, cutting his meat. "Of course." We talked about other things. His parents, Harlan and June Marsh, had moved from Tucson the previous spring. They'd been renting a 1-bedroom near Drew and Renee's apartment, but the building had raised rates significantly and they were stressed about it. Drew mentioned this twice during dinner, both times glancing at me, the way you glance at a vending machine you're hoping will give you something for free. I drove home that night without saying anything, but I'd recognized the load pattern. 32 years of engineering teaches you that pressure doesn't announce itself. It just builds, quietly, until something gives. The second visit happened 2 weeks later. Drew came alone this time, said Renee was at a baby shower. He walked through my front door, hands in his pockets, and didn't wait for me to offer a seat. He sat on my couch and looked around with that same measuring expression from before. "I'll be straight with you, Dale." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "My parents are in a tough spot. Rent went up $400 a month. They're on fixed income. Social Security doesn't stretch the way it used to." I said nothing. "You've got the upper floor sitting empty. 2 bedrooms, their own bathroom. They'd be invisible. You wouldn't even know they were here." He spread his hands like he was presenting a solution to a problem I'd asked him to solve. "It's family. That's what family does." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "No." He blinked. "No." His expression shifted. Not anger yet. Recalculation. "Dale, come on. We're not talking forever. Just until they get stable. I bought this house to live in it the way I want to live in it. I worked 32 years for this. The answer is no." He stood up slowly, the way people do when they're pretending to be calm. "Renee's going to be really disappointed. That's between you and Renee." He left without shaking my hand. The call from Renee came that evening. Her voice was different from the afternoon she'd heard about the house. Tight, careful, like she was trying to hold several things at once and not drop any of them. "Dad, Drew told me what happened. Can you think about it? They really are struggling." I did think about it. The answer is no, but you have the space. Having space doesn't obligate me to fill it with someone else's problem. Silence. Then softer. I know, but they're family. They're Drew's family. She didn't respond to that. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad and wrote down everything Drew had said, word for word, as close as I could reconstruct it. 32 years of project documentation. You write things down because memory is unreliable, and situations are not. I didn't know yet how useful those notes would become. 2 days later, Drew came back. No call ahead, no text. I saw his car pull into the driveway on my kitchen camera. I'd had a basic security system installed when I moved in, habit from years of monitoring job sites remotely. I opened the door before he reached the porch. He stepped inside like the last visit hadn't ended the way it had. I've been thinking, he said. What if we made it formal? My parents pay you $800 a month. Market rate for a room in this area, maybe a little under. It's income for you. It helps them. Everybody wins. Everybody doesn't win, I said. I lose the thing I bought the house for. Quiet, my own space, my own schedule. His jaw tightened. You're being stubborn about something that would cost you nothing. It would cost me everything I bought this house to have. He looked at me for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something flat and deliberate. Dale, I'm not asking. My parents are moving in on Saturday. We're bringing them. That's how it's going to go. The words sat in the air between us. I nodded slowly. Okay, Adrian. The satisfaction that moved across his face was immediate and total. He thought he'd found the pressure point, thought the ultimatum had done what his charm couldn't. Good, he said. You'll see. It'll be fine. You'll barely notice them. After he left, I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard. The oak tree my daughter had liked immediately when she first walked through. The porch where I planned to spend my evenings. Everything I had worked toward. I picked up my phone and called my old colleague Warren. We'd worked together for 15 years before he retired and went into property law consulting. He'd once told me over beers that the most expensive mistake homeowners make is waiting too long to get legal advice. I'd remembered that. I sent a text, need to talk. Homeowner issue, needs to move fast. He responded in 4 minutes. Tomorrow morning, my office. Bring coffee. Warren had a small practice out of a converted Victorian on the north side, all dark wood and stacked files. He listened to me without interrupting, which is rare and valuable. The critical thing, he said when I finished, is what happens if they cross the threshold and stay 30 days. At that point, Ohio law considers them tenants. It doesn't matter that there's no lease. Eviction requires court proceedings. Could take months, could cost you thousands. So I stop them before they get in. Exactly. You're the sole owner. Nobody can force entry. If you post the property and have the right documentation, anyone who attempts to enter against your wishes is trespassing. He pulled out a legal pad. I'll draft a formal notice. I'd also recommend calling the county sheriff's office. They have a civil standby service. 2 deputies, present Saturday, keeps everything calm and legal. Can he actually force me legally to house them? Warren shook his head. Ohio doesn't have filial responsibility statutes that extend to in-laws. They could try a civil suit, but they'd need to show genuine need, and Social Security income plus his salary would kill that argument in about 10 minutes. I drove home feeling the particular clarity that comes from understanding a structural problem completely, not relief. Just clarity. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday in motion. I hired a company to upgrade my security cameras. 4 angles covering the full perimeter, motion alerts to my phone, cloud backup. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line and arranged for 2 deputies to be present at 1:30 Saturday afternoon. Warren sent over the drafted no trespass notice professionally formatted. Thursday evening, Renee called again. Dad just confirming Saturday. Drew's parents are so grateful. I was thinking I could come by Sunday and help them get settled. I kept my voice even, but see how Saturday goes first. Of course, a brightness in her voice I recognized as performed. She'd done that since childhood when she was pretending something was fine. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Renee. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time. My daughter had already built a future in her mind, or I simply absorbed whatever her husband decided. She hadn't asked how I felt. She'd assumed I'd converted. The way people assume a load-bearing wall has already given way when it hasn't. Friday, I confirmed the deputy's availability. I reviewed Warren's documentation until the key phrases were automatic. I walked the perimeter of my property and checked every camera angle. Then I drove to the hardware store and bought a gate latch, the kind with a padlock, and installed it at the end of my driveway. The no trespassing sign went beside it. Clean, visible, professional. I slept fine that night. Saturday morning was overcast, mid-50s. I dressed the way I'd dress for a pre-construction meeting with city officials. Dark pants, button down, work boots. The deputies arrived at 1:23. Two of them, a woman named Deputy Caldwell and her partner, a quiet man who introduced himself as Sergeant Torres. They positioned behind me when we walked out, flanking at a respectful distance. At 1:40, my phone buzzed. Motion alert. 2 vehicles, eastern approach. Drew's black pickup appeared first, moving slowly. Behind it, a rental cargo van. I watched them through the gate bars as they came to a stop in the street. Through the windshield, I could see Drew's face change, first confusion, then recognition, then something much harder. He was out of the truck before the engine stopped. "What is this?" "Good afternoon, Adrian," I said. Deputy Caldwell stepped forward. "Sir, please stay calm. The property owner has a document for you." Drew's eyes moved across the scene. Deputies. Gate. Sign. Me standing on the other side of all of it. "You agreed. You said okay." "I didn't agree," I said. "I ended a conversation I didn't want to continue. There's a difference." Caldwell offered the notice. He took it without looking at it. "This is insane, Dale. They have nowhere to go." The van door opened. Harlan Marsh climbed down first. A lean man in his late 60s, windbreaker, gray at the temples. June followed, small and sharp-eyed, looking at the deputies the way people look at something they didn't expect to have to understand. "What's going on?" June's voice carried clearly. "Drew, what is this?" "Your son demanded I house you," I said, keeping my voice measured. I refused multiple times. When I said no, he told me it wasn't up to me, that you were moving in Saturday and that was final. Today is my response to that. June looked at Drew. Something moved across her face that I couldn't quite name. Renee had gotten out of the truck. She walked toward the gate slowly, and when she saw my expression, something in her cracked open. "Dad, please. Renee." I kept my voice as steady as I could. "Your husband didn't ask me," he told me. When I said no, he repeated it louder. "That's not a family request. That's a demand, but they need help." "Then the person who brought them here should help them." Drew had moved closer to the gate, voice dropping. "You're going to regret this. You think this is over? We'll get a lawyer. We'll make your life miserable." Sergeant Torres stepped forward. "Sir, that kind of language isn't helpful. The property owner has every legal right to deny access. This notice formalizes that. You need to leave the premises." "Fine." Drew's voice was gravel. He turned to Harlan and June. "Get back in the van," June said. "We're really just going to Mom." Something in Drew's tone stopped her. Harlan put his hand gently on his wife's arm and guided her back toward the van. He glanced at me once as he walked past. I looked back at him. I didn't feel good about Harlan and June. They hadn't demanded anything. They just let their son do it for them, and I didn't know yet whether that was weakness or trust. Either way, it didn't change anything. Renee stood at the gate a moment longer, mascara at her lash line, not yet fallen. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "I explained it," I said. "I know you heard me." She turned and walked back to the truck. Drew didn't look at me again. The cargo van did an awkward U-turn and headed back down the street. Drew's truck reversed and followed. Deputy Caldwell cleared her throat softly. "That went as well as it could, Mr. Dale. You have all the documentation in order? Everything? Then you're in good shape. Call us if there are any further incidents." They left. I stood at the gate alone. The street was empty and quiet and looked like every other Saturday afternoon in a Columbus suburb. Nothing remarkable. Everything changed. I walked back to the house. At the porch steps, I stopped and looked at the oak tree in the backyard, the one Renee had liked. I stood there for a while before going inside. The voicemail started that evening. Drew's voice, stripping its sales pitch layer by layer over the course of 7 messages. By the 4th one, he was past persuasion and into something raw. You're going to see what it costs to treat family like trespassers. By the 7th, you think you're so careful. You have no idea what I can do. I saved everyone, created a folder on my phone, labeled it by date, and engineered documents. By midweek, I'd received 22 calls. I answered none. Renee's messages were different, quieter, more confused, more painful. Dad, please just call me. I don't understand what happened. I thought you were okay with this. That last part was the hardest to hear, because it told me she'd genuinely believed Drew's version. She'd been handed a story and she'd carried it without asking me if it was true. I wrote it all down. Every call, every voicemail, every text. Logged in a spreadsheet with timestamps. My project manager habits were 40 years old by then. They didn't know how to stop. 3 weeks after Saturday, I got a text from Drew's number with no greeting. Just, we're not done. 2 days after that, certified mail arrived. I signed for it on my porch on a cold October morning, sliced the envelope open with my keys, and read the return address on the legal filing. Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. Plaintiff, Renee Torres Marsh and Adrian Marsh. Defendant, Dale Torres. My daughter had filed suit against me. I read it twice, standing in the foyer with the morning light coming through the side lights. It was a negligence claim dressed in family language. They were arguing I had a moral and civil responsibility to provide emergency housing to family members in genuine need. Drew had found a filing angle. It wasn't strong, but it was real, and it had my daughter's name at the top. I called Warren within the hour. It's a reach, he said after I'd read him the complaint. They're trying to construct a duty of care that doesn't exist in Ohio law for in-laws. But we still need to defend it properly, and I'd like to bring in Sandra Keating from our family litigation group. Whatever it takes, bring everything you have. Every message, every voicemail, every note from every conversation. I have it all. Dale. A pause. Most people don't document this way. I spent 32 years watching what happens when people don't. We met with Sandra the next morning. She was 53, direct. With reading glasses she pushed up into her hair when she wasn't using them. She went through my documentation the way I'd seen good inspectors go through a structural report, methodical, marking things, not reacting, just absorbing. The voicemails are the strongest piece, she said. His threatening language undercuts their entire argument that this was a reasonable family request. We'll also subpoena their financial records. If Harlan and June are receiving Social Security and Drew is earning a real estate commission income, we can demonstrate there was no genuine housing emergency. He'll claim they couldn't afford anything suitable. People find suitable housing every day in Columbus on Social Security. We'll find comparable rentals in their preferred area. This isn't a necessity case. It's a leverage case. She closed the folder. You're going to be fine. But I want you to understand, they may put Renee on the stand. I'd thought about that on the drive over. I know, I said. The hearing was set for December. The weeks between were quiet in a way that felt less like peace and more like held breath. I reviewed Sandra's preparation notes, answered her questions, provided whatever she requested. One evening, I found myself at my kitchen table with a photograph of Renee at 9 years old, gap-toothed, standing in front of the house in Bexley where we lived when Connie was still alive. I'd coached her soccer team that year. 4 practices a week, every Saturday game, 3 years running. I turned the photograph face down and went back to organizing the evidence file. The courthouse was a gray concrete tower in downtown Columbus. I arrived 40 minutes early, found Sandra in the 4th floor hallway, and we reviewed the morning's order one final time. When Drew and Renee arrived with their attorney, a man in his 50s with a leather portfolio and the confident walk of someone billing by the hour, Drew's eyes found mine across the hall. He didn't look away immediately. Neither did I. In the courtroom, their attorney presented the case as though it were obvious. I had space. His client's family needed it. I'd refused out of selfishness rather than legitimate reason. He used the word elderly about Harlan and June, who were 66 and 64 respectively, Renee testified. She walked to the stand slowly, like someone carrying something heavy. Her attorney asked about our relationship. She said we'd grown apart after her mother passed, that I'd always been self-sufficient to the point of being closed off. She didn't look at me once. I listened to my daughter describe a version of our history that I didn't recognize in a voice that sounded like she was reading it rather than remembering it. Then Sandra stood. Your Honor, let's look at what actually occurred. Her voice was calm and precise. Mr. Pixel, Torres did not refuse a request. He refused a demand. May I play a recording? She pressed play. Drew's voice filled the courtroom. I'm not asking. My parents are moving into your house Saturday. We're bringing them. That's final. The judge, a woman in her early 60s, with silver hair and expression built for skepticism, looked at the plaintiff's table. Sandra continued. She presented Harlan and June's combined Social Security income, $44,000 annually. Drew's prior year earnings, $68,000. She produced listings for two-bedroom units in the Columbus metro area, comparable to what Drew had claimed was unavailable. Then she played 3 of the voicemails, the threatening ones. The courtroom was quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation system. The judge's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind her eyes did. Counsel, she said, looking at Drew's attorney, your client's communications significantly undermine the claim that this was a good faith family matter. Drew's attorney started to respond. She held up one hand. The claim is dismissed. The evidence shows no genuine need that could not be addressed through other means. Furthermore, I'm awarding the defendant legal fees in the amount of $4,200 to be paid by the plaintiffs within 60 days. She looked at Drew directly. This court does not look favorably on using legal proceedings as an extension of personal disputes. Consider that clearly. The gavel came down. In the hallway, Sandra made notes on her legal pad. Drew walked past without speaking. Renee walked past more slowly, and when she reached me, she stopped. Dad. Her voice was barely there. I heard those voicemails in there. I've never heard them before. He told me you've been threatening him. I let that sit for a moment. When he told you I'd agreed on Saturday, I said, did you call me to check? She looked at the floor. No. When he said I was being unreasonable, did you ask me for my side? No. That's not something I can fix for you, Renee, but it's something you're going to have to think about. She didn't say anything. I walked to the elevator. Behind me, I heard her exhale, something that wasn't quite words. Outside, the December air was clean and sharp. Sandra walked beside me to the parking garage. You handled that as well as anyone could, she said. I didn't feel like I'd won anything except the right to go home. The call stopped after the hearing. Then, 10 days later, movement at my gate on the security camera at 2 in the morning. I was asleep and the motion alert woke me. I pulled up the feed on my phone in the dark and saw Drew at the gate, his hand on the latch, trying to force it. He was in jeans and a jacket, no coat. His movements were not the movements of a man who was thinking clearly. I dialed 911 without getting out of bed. I described the situation calmly, gave my address, said yes, I knew the person, said yes, there was a history of documented threats. The dispatcher kept me on the line. On the security feed, I watched Drew kick the gate twice, then start shouting at the house. You want to play it this way, Dale? Fine, we play it this way, Dale. Fine, we play it this way. The patrol cars arrived in 4 minutes. It felt longer. 2 officers approached. Drew turned to face them and did not do the smart thing. The squad car left with him inside it. I went downstairs and opened the door when the officers knocked. They were professional and efficient. Criminal trespass, disturbing the peace, resisting a lawful order. They had the security footage reference number. They told me to expect a call from the DA's office. I locked the door, went back upstairs, and backed up the security footage to 3 separate drives. In the morning, the intercom buzzed. Renee. I looked at the camera feed. She was alone. She looked like she hadn't slept. I went out to the gate. I bailed him out at 5 a.m., she said. She wasn't crying. She looked past that. She wasn't crying. She looked past that. He was angry in the holding cell. Angry at you. Angry at me for not backing him up more. She stopped. He wasn't sorry. I waited. I think I've been telling myself a story, she said. That he was just under stress, that this wasn't really who he was. But I saw him in there. She looked at me. That's who he is. I didn't respond right away. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She'd lost weight. The performed brightness was completely gone. What are you going to do? I asked. I called the lawyer this morning, before I came here. She met my eyes. I'm filing for divorce. The restraining order came through 3 days later. Harlan and June found a senior apartment in Westerville, a decent one-bedroom, $920 a month, which Drew was ordered to help fund as part of the separation agreement. The financial anatomy of what Drew had tried to force onto me had collapsed back onto him. My legal fees he owed, his own attorney's costs, child support assessments pending, his parents' rent contribution, the storage unit he'd rented when things fell apart at their place. Everything he'd tried to take had become everything he owed. I didn't think about that with satisfaction. I thought about it the way I'd think about a structural failure I'd predicted on paper, as a fact, not a victory. Renee and I talked twice a week through that winter. Short calls at first, then longer. She found a 2-bedroom apartment in Upper Arlington, moved in February, took the boys, my grandsons, 7-year-old Marcus and 4-year-old Eli, and built something honest from the rubble of something false. Small apartment, real life. In March she texted, "Can we do Sunday dinner? I'll bring the boys." I typed back, "Come at 4. I'll make pot roast." They arrived that Sunday with the noise that small boys make when they've been in a car long enough. Marcus ran straight to the backyard. Eli stopped at the kitchen door and looked at me with serious 4-year-old eyes and said, "Grandpa, your house is really big." "It is," I said. "Want to see the whole thing?" "Yes, please." I took him through every room while Renee stood in the kitchen and let herself breathe. She'd done that on the first visit, I remembered, hand trailing along the walls, exploring. Now she was just standing still, which was its own kind of arrival. We ate at the dining table. Marcus talked about his soccer team without pausing for responses. Ellie fell asleep in the living room before dessert. Renee and I sat with our coffee after. The table cleared, the house quiet, except for the sounds boys make when they're breathing. "I'm sorry, Dad." She'd said it before. But this time it sounded different. Not guilty, just real. Not for the divorce. For before. For not asking. For taking his word. "I know. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Did you always know it would end up here? At the dining table like this?" I thought about it. About the night I'd stood at my kitchen window after Drew's first visit and felt something cooling inside my chest. About the documentation. The gate. The deputies. The courtroom. I knew what I was protecting, I said. I didn't know what would grow up around it. She nodded slowly, wrapped her hands around her mug. Outside the window, the March light was starting its long lean toward spring. The oak tree was still bare, but you could see the buds coming in along the lower branches, that first pale green that tells you something is moving underground even when the surface still looks like winter. Marcus came back inside with muddy shoes and a question about whether I had a soccer ball. I did. We found it in the garage, and for 40 minutes, I stood on the back porch in the cold and watched my grandson practice corner kicks against the fence, while Renee laughed at something on her phone, and Eli slept on my couch with his mouth open and his arms thrown wide, the way children sleep when they feel completely safe. This was what I'd built the house for. Not the square footage, not the coffered ceilings or the west-facing porch or the 4 bedrooms. This, whatever this was. The thing you can't force and can't demand and can't take from someone. The thing that only shows up when you've defended it long enough that the people trying to take it give up and go away. I hadn't won a fight. I'd held a line, and what had grown up on the safe side of that line was something I didn't have a word for except mine. The sun went behind the clouds, and the yard went gray, and Marcus kept kicking, and Eli slept, and Renee put her phone down and just sat there, quiet, the way someone sits when they finally stop pretending. I poured myself another cup of coffee and watched my family through the kitchen window. All of it, mine.